Andrea Johnson with us today. She is a master gardener in Swift County. If you remember back to last month, we had another master gardener, Lori, and she was from what county, Brian?
Steele County.
Steele County. So we're getting good use out of our master gardeners we have through Extension. So thanks for joining us today, Andrea. We'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Becca. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay, so, well, what is a greenhouse? You can see in my photo here what had started out as my greenhouse last year. I like to think of a greenhouse as something that just lets in light and heat and traps it to help plants grow when it's still cold outside. And if any of you would like to make a guess in the chat box about if you were, I know some of us are south of the Twin Cities and some of us are north, but according to University of Minnesota climatologist Mark Seeley, in the last 20 years, what's our average date for our last frost that we get in the spring? If you want to make a guess and put that in the. So so the greenhouse is something that lets in the light and heat and traps it to help plants grow when it's still cold outside. But we can do some things in our short season, so we can start leafy vegetables and some of those things earlier in the spring. And it all depends on how much you want to watch the weather and how much you want to baby your vegetables. So as Nick said, lettuce, spinach, kale, or even Swiss chard can germinate at temperatures as low as 45 degrees and grow at warmer temperatures, but they can be planted at 45 degrees. So, well, first of all, I'm seeing there's a couple of guesses. Brian, did you want to note that at all, or?
Yep, I can. Looks like we've got some guesses. The first part of spring. I saw one in March, June 1st, April, June 15th, May, April 18th, September 27th.
Okay, so according to Mark Seeley, in the last 20 years around the Twin Cities, April 20th was the average date for the last frost. So even if our soils are cooler than 50 degrees, there might be opportunities to do some, if you have something that works as a greenhouse. First thing I wanted to show you is a very simple greenhouse I did a few years ago. So this is a straw bale that has been conditioned, but you could also use a pot. You could use some kind of a container, and the plastic on top needs to have a rating of 2 to 3 MIL. Bit thicker plastic, and so I am hoping that maybe you can draw some pictures of what you think might work as your own greenhouse in the spring. And it could be a straw bale or something like that you can actually heat up a little bit from the inside, or you could even use a container. Now, if you've using some pots or straw bale, you can use a couple of posts and pound those into the ground, and then use a wire along the top, and then you can string your plastic out on each side, like you're hanging sheets on a clothesline, and that works really well for protecting those young seeds and seedlings. One thing about pounding in posts, and this is something you have to work with your parents on, is there's a website called Gopher State onecall.org. And you go there and you fill out a ticket. And then what happens is in the next few days, representatives of the utility companies come out and they mark the areas where you might have underground lines. So you want to make sure you don't pound in a post directly over that underground line. But they do this at no cost to you or to your family. And it makes it so you can pound in those posts in an area that's safe. Okay, so I'm thinking you might want to draw some pictures of something like this, and you could use a pot in a way that prevents the wind from blowing in. You could use your home to block the wind while giving your greenhouse as much access to light as you can. There should be as much light as possible. You're looking at where the sun is in the morning and how it travels across the sky and where it ends up in the nighttime. So you can have as much light as possible. And you also want to make sure there's some airflow inside your greenhouse. Okay, next one is 1 year I started my lettuce and Swiss chard and spinach in an old pallet. And I just took some Miracle-Gro soil and I kind of mixed in some twigs and leaves. You could even put in some shredded paper, and that just kind of helps with drainage and aerating the soil. Not too much, but just makes it so water can drain through. And in this case, you can just put your plastic over the top somehow, and that lettuce germinates and starts to grow. And then as it warms up, take that off and you can have your own little salad bar. The important thing is to work with your weather. If it's too cold for the grass to turn green, or if there are frost warnings, you need to hold off on setting up a greenhouse that doesn't have a form of heat. So have fun and experiment and see what works for you. Now I'd like to show you my greenhouse. And I got the directions from Joel Karsten, who has been working on straw bale gardens all around the world. So here is a greenhouse that I made. I set my straw bales up around the outside, and I had my 2x4s, and I had 2 cattle panels that I bent around, and then I covered it with that 2 to 3 MIL plastic tape. So there is a place for you to get these directions on my next slide. It's the 6-week greenhouse in 6 steps. You can look that up online. And I don't know if you can click on that so we can see that. And there it is. Joel Karsten started this method, and that's what it will look like. So I think you can explore that more if you're interested. And then I have a photo of what my greenhouse looked like last year on May 16th. So I did a lot of planting in late April last year. I made a little movie that I'd like to show you now from April 25th that shows how it got to this point.
This straw bale is ready for me to plant. I've conditioned it for 2 weeks. I've put nitrogen in it. It's been thoroughly soaked. And the temperature inside the bale is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you'll see there's kettle panels here, and my idea is to have pole beams grow up all the way to the top and over to make an arch. And that's for my friend Jennifer Gorham, so that she can sit out here and enjoy this. I think I'll enjoy it too. So the first step is to put a little bit of soil here, and I just have some soil I had left over from last year. I'm just going to just sprinkle it here. Now if you really want to know how to do this, go to Joel Carston's Learn to Grow a Straw Bale Garden, because he is the expert and he developed this method. So since I'm going to be planting seeds here in April, which is very early for West Central Minnesota, I'm just spreading a little bit of potting soil on here first. Okay, so I've got that. Now what I want to do is I want to just make a little design, a little template with my cup here. So I'm just going to go like that all the way along, so I know where to plant my green beans. And these are early maturing pole beans. Okay, so then I just have the beans here, and I'm just going to stick one in each of those spots. You don't have to be fancy, and the big thing with straw bale gardening is you don't want to overseed the bales, because the plants just grow so big and it doesn't do any good if they're crowded. I love this method because there's no weeding, and when you plant individual seeds like this, you don't really have to worry about you know, pulling out seedlings that when there's too many. And it's always hard to pull out a seedling when you've gone to all the work of planting it and seeing it grow. Now in the front of this, I'm going to plant spinach, and I've already done this to 2 other bales. I'm going to wait with my other 3 bales as I'm going to get some tomatoes and squash and sweet potatoes and things like that to put in my straw bale garden. I also want to plant some gourds that are going to stream over the top of the greenhouse. Now, a few of you have asked me about the smell, and I would say, yeah, I have been dealing with some smell in my greenhouse this last 2 weeks. It's not too bad right now, but there's been times when it's been a pretty strong ammonia smell. And I guess I would refer you to Joel Carston and see what he says about that. I guess I did ask, and he said, you know, be sure you keep the sides or front of the greenhouse open during the day, or whatever you need to do, and make sure it doesn't get too warm inside as well. Eventually that smell should go away. But I've noticed with other methods of straw bale gardening that I've done, I haven't really had a problem with that. And I think that's because I didn't have it covered. So I've been straw bale gardening for about, I'd say at least 6 years. And it's worked out great for me. Generally what I'll do is I'll just put 1 tomato in a bale, and that's where I've had my greatest success, because I've been able to grow about 100 tomatoes per plant, and I'm not a big canner or freezer, and so I am able to use that amount throughout growing season. By early December, I'm pretty tired of tomatoes, and so I'm ready for a break until spring. Well, I have some good things planted here, and I can't wait to see the spinach and the green beans pop up out of the ground and eventually have good things to eat here in West Central Minnesota. Thank you.
Okay, so that's where I was at last year in April. We'll see what April holds, has in store this year. I still have the same structure up. I'll put the plastic back on it and see what happens. So now I'd like to show you a picture of, okay, so here's that bale on May 16th, and it looks pretty crowded to me. I should have probably put about half the number of plants in there that I had. And so I'm going to work with that a little bit this year. I think using a palette also within my greenhouse for this year coming up. Let's look at what the garden looked like on June 25th. Okay, here is some lettuce and onions I was eating by before the 1st of July. And then this is looked in early August, and I was getting all sorts of vegetables, and I could just reach up and get some cucumbers and some beans. So it was a lot of fun. You can also see around the front, I've put some chicken wire, which worked great to keep out the bunnies in my town. And so, yeah, that's my greenhouse. After seeing this, I'd love to read or hear about what ideas you have for planting things in the springtime and what plans you might need to make that happen. So